3 days to decide your fate, whispered Ho Ditcha, the man Edwin called the traitor. When Stone Hawan leads warriors against the Arapaho, you can join them or seize your moment to flee. Edwin's mind flashed to yesterday's ceremony. 40 men suspended by skewers through their flesh, not one begging for mercy. 7 years among the Comanche had shown him how thin the line between captive and convert truly was. The disturbing thought haunted him. Part of him now understood their world. Eastman stirred his morning meal absently, his mind occupied with the fragments of conversation he'd overheard at first light. 2 young warriors had passed behind his shelter, speaking of Stone Hawan's plans in hushed tones. Their words had ignited a spark of hope that now consumed his thoughts. He set aside the wooden bowl and moved with deliberate calm through the village. 7 years of captivity had taught him to mask his emotions. Any sign of unusual excitement might draw unwelcome attention. The morning air carried the scent of wood smoke and dried meat, familiar smells that he hoped soon to leave behind forever. Near the stream where women washed hides and filled water vessels, Eastman spotted 3 Fingers, a warrior who had shown him small kindnesses over the years. The man's weathered face broke into a half-smile as Eastman approached. "Your knife needs sharpening," Eastman remarked in Comanche, gesturing to 3 Fingers' blade. The warrior unsheathed it, turning it in the morning light. "It serves well enough." Eastman took the knife, testing its edge with his thumb. "I heard whispers of a war party forming. Stone Hawan rides against the Arapaho?" 3 Fingers' eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. 3 days. We leave at dawn." He reclaimed his knife, studying Eastman's face. "Why does this interest you, White Hair?" Eastman shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. "The young men speak of glory and plunder. I merely wonder if I will always remain behind with the old men and women." 3 Fingers grunted, neither encouragement nor dismissal, then moved away, leaving Eastman to consider his next step. The most crucial obstacle stood clear in his mind: Wakome. The old medicine man had claimed Eastman as his own when the raiding party had brought him to the village 7 years ago. Though Wakome had spared him the torture that other captives endured and had taught him the language and customs of the tribe, the medicine man kept him under close watch. No hunting party, no trading expedition had ever included Eastman. Seeking Wakome's permission directly seemed futile. The old man would see through any ruse. Eastman needed an advocate, someone Wakome respected. Stone Hawan, the war chief, might be that person, if Eastman could convince him first. The midday sun beat down on Eastman's shoulders as he approached Stone Hawan's lodge. The structure stood apart from others, larger and adorned with painted symbols and grim trophies, evidence of the chief's prowess in battle. Outside the entrance, Stone Hawan sat cross-legged on a buffalo hide, engaged in conversation with several older warriors. Their voices carried on the still air, speaking of routes and water sources, of attack strategies and the number of warriors to be committed to the raid. Eastman halted at a respectful distance, eyes lowered, awaiting acknowledgement. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour as the council continued. From fragments of conversation, he gathered that the Arapaho had crossed into Comanche hunting grounds, stealing horses and killing 2 young hunters, an offense that demanded swift retribution. When the council finally dispersed, Stone Hawan remained seated, staring contemplatively across the village. Eastman drew a steadying breath and prepared to approach. Before he could take a step, another figure appeared, moving with purpose toward the chief. Eastman's chest tightened in recognition. Ho Ditcha, the man many warriors called the renegade, behind his back. Older than most warriors, with streaks of gray in his long hair, Ho Ditcha had earned the distrust of many for advocating peace with white settlers in council meetings. Despite this, Stone Hawan appeared to value his counsel. Eastman remained motionless, his request momentarily forgotten as he watched this unexpected development. Ho Ditcha approached Stone Hawan with a purposeful stride. "My brother prepares for the warpath," he stated, his tone neither approving nor questioning. Stone Hawan nodded, his expression impassive. "Yes, his Dea. I grow weary of idleness, and my young men are impatient." They clamor to be led against the Arapaho, who have invaded our territory and cut off several of our hunting parties." The chief's hand clenched into a fist. "I have determined to lead a strong war party to teach these cowardly thieves a lesson they will not soon forget." Ho Ditcha seated himself without invitation, a liberty few others would dare take with the war chief. "Stone Hawan," he said after a moment, "it is my wish that we should be friends, and that the ill feeling which has existed between us and our young men should cease." The chief's eyebrows raised slightly at this unexpected declaration. "For this reason," Ho Ditcha continued, "I have come to offer my services on your expedition as a volunteer. If you accept, I will join your party with my entire band and serve under your orders." Eastman watched the exchange intently, struggling to understand Ho Ditcha's motivation. The renegade had consistently opposed raids and warfare in council meetings. Why would he suddenly volunteer for a war party? Stone Hawan's face revealed nothing as he rose, filled his pipe with tobacco, and lit it in silence. He drew several puffs, then passed it to Ho Ditcha, who accepted it with reverence, took a few draws, and returned it. The pipe passing between them signified the seriousness of their discussion. After completing this ritual, Stone Hawan emptied the pipe and returned it to its case. A pouch of fawn skin, decorated with porcupine quills, dyed in bright colors. "Your words are good," the chief finally said. "You are a great brave, and you shall ride with me on the warpath. With your aid, I shall surely be successful." He paused, studying Ho Ditcha's face. "And when we return in triumph, who shall deny to the friend of Stone Hawan a seat in the council? I know your wish, my brother, and it shall yet be gratified." So that was it, Eastman realized. Ho Ditcha sought to regain his diminished influence in the tribe by proving himself on this expedition. "Now let us assemble our warriors and make ready," Stone Hawan continued. "I wish to depart before sunrise tomorrow." Ho Ditcha nodded his agreement. "My party could be ready to leave within the hour if necessary." Then, without warning, he added, "I must ask my brother one favor, that Dada Hare may accompany our party." Eastman's breath caught in his throat. Ho Ditcha had just requested precisely what he himself had come to ask for. But why? Stone Hawan looked toward Eastman in surprise. "Why does his Sodeta ask this?" he questioned, his brow furrowed. "Does my brother not know that none but Wakome can grant this request?" Ho Ditcha's expression remained calm. "Because if Stone Hawan asks the medicine chief, he will not refuse. But were I to make such a request, it would be in vain." Stone Hawan considered this for a moment, then addressed Eastman directly. "Dada Hare, why do you wish to join the war party I am about to lead?" Eastman's mind raced for an appropriate response, but before he could formulate one, Ho Ditcha answered for him. "The young man grows tired," the renegade explained, "of being left in the village with the squaws and old men while the other young braves go to war or to hunt, winning scalps and plunder. He believes he should receive the same privileges as others, since he has been regularly adopted into the tribe." Ho Ditcha gestured toward Eastman. "I believe his request is reasonable and should be granted." Eastman nodded, finding his voice. "I have lived among the people for 7 winters," he said, using the Comanche term for themselves. "I have learned your ways and your language. I wish to prove my worth as a warrior." Stone Hawan's dark eyes studied Eastman for a long moment. "If Wakome consents," he finally said, "I will have no objection to your joining our party." He rose to his feet. "I will speak to the medicine chief and use my influence to gain his permission for your first appearance as a warrior." Relief washed through Eastman, though he kept his expression neutral. "I thank you, Stone Hawan." The chief departed in the direction of the temple, presumably to seek out Wakome. Eastman turned to Ho Ditcha, curiosity overcoming his caution. "Why did you speak for me?" he asked directly. The renegade's weathered face revealed nothing. "You have lived among us long enough to earn the chance," he said simply. Then, changing the subject, "Come, we must prepare you for the warpath. There is much to be done before dawn." Eastman followed, his mind spinning with questions. Why had Ho Ditcha intervened on his behalf? Did the man somehow suspect his plan to escape? Or was there some other purpose behind his unexpected assistance? Whatever the reason, the first step of Eastman's plan had succeeded beyond expectation. Now he needed to focus on the preparations and on convincing Wakome, whose permission remained crucial to his hopes for freedom. As they walked toward Ho Ditcha's lodge, Eastman felt the weight of 7 years of captivity pressing on him, alongside the tentative lightness of renewed hope. The prairie stretched endless beyond the village, both promise and threat, a vast emptiness that could deliver him to freedom or swallow him without a trace. 3 days ago, escape had seemed impossible. Now, unexpectedly, the path was opening before him. He would be ready when dawn broke over the eastern horizon. "These will serve you well," Ho Ditcha said, spreading an array of weapons across the buffalo hide floor of his lodge. The afternoon sun slanted through the smoke hole, catching the steel tip of a lance that glinted with deadly promise. Following Stone Hawan's departure to seek Wakome's approval, Ho Ditcha had wasted no time in preparing Eastman for the journey ahead. The renegade seemed oddly confident that the medicine man's permission would be granted, though Eastman harbored doubts. 7 years as Wakome's charge had taught him the old man's reluctance to let him venture beyond the village perimeter. Eastman knelt beside the weapons, carefully appraising each one. The long lance bore a crimson pennant that would flutter in the prairie wind, marking its bearer as a Comanche warrior. Beside it lay a battle axe of unusual design, Mexican in origin, Eastman guessed, likely taken as plunder in some past raid. "This bow has claimed many lives," Ho Ditcha said, handing Eastman a stout war bow and a quiver of arrows. "The arrowheads are treated with a mixture only the oldest medicine men know how to prepare. Even a shallow wound will bring fever and death." Eastman tested the bow's tension, feeling its resistance against his pull. The weapon was heavier than it appeared, designed for power rather than distance. He examined an arrow, noting the dark, resinous coating on its tip, a poison the Comanche used to ensure their enemies would not survive even minor injuries. A tomahawk and scalping knife completed his offensive arsenal. For defense, Ho Ditcha presented a circular shield made from the hardened hide of a buffalo bull, stretched over a wooden frame and dried until it had acquired an almost iron-like rigidity. "The shield will turn aside arrows and deflect glancing blows," Ho Ditcha explained. "Keep it close when battle begins." Eastman hefted the shield, surprised by its lightness despite its strength. It bore painted symbols he recognized as protective signs: lightning bolts, hawk silhouettes, and the tracks of swift animals. "Now," Ho Ditcha announced, setting aside the weapons, "we must find you a horse worthy of a warrior." The sun had begun its westward descent when they reached the vast prairie where the tribe's herd grazed. More than 2,000 mustangs moved across the landscape, their coats catching the golden afternoon light. The animals raised their heads at the men's approach, alert but unafraid, accustomed to the comings and goings of their human masters. "A warrior is only as good as his horse," Ho Ditcha remarked, scanning the herd with a critical eye. "Choose poorly, and you die before the battle begins." What followed was a lesson in horsemanship that Eastman had never expected. Despite the urgency of their preparations, Ho Ditcha demonstrated an extraordinary patience and expertise in evaluating each potential mount. He rejected animal after animal for reasons Eastman could barely discern: a slightly awkward gait, nostrils that flared too widely, eyes that showed too much white. "That one shows spirit but lacks endurance," Ho Ditcha explained, nodding toward a handsome bay. "And that black would falter on the 3rd day of hard riding." They moved methodically through the herd for nearly 2 hours. Ho Ditcha dismissed nearly 40 animals before finally pointing to a large piebald mustang grazing apart from the others. "There," he said decisively, "strong chest, clear eyes, good legs, he will carry you far." The horse was indeed magnificent, powerfully built with a white and brown mottled coat that would provide natural camouflage against the varied landscape they would traverse. Together, they separated it from the herd, and Eastman felt the animal's wary strength as he led it back toward the village. They brought the horse to where other warriors had already picketed their mounts for the night, preparing for the early departure. Ho Ditcha showed Eastman how to secure it properly, then handed him a hair bridle and buffalo hide girth. "Go eat," the renegade instructed. "Return to my lodge within the hour. We must prepare your appearance before darkness falls." Eastman managed only a few mouthfuls of food, his appetite diminished by the mixture of anticipation and anxiety churning within him. Afterward, he entered the temple complex, part of him hoping to avoid Wakome until everything was finalized, another part knowing a confrontation was inevitable. The familiar chambers stood empty as he wandered through them, noting details he had seen countless times before. The painted symbols on the walls, the arrangement of ceremonial objects, the worn paths in the earthen floor. Would this be his last time seeing these things? Or would his plan fail, bringing him back to this place in chains, or worse? Time passed quickly, and soon Eastman needed to return to Ho Ditcha's lodge. Crossing the mystery chamber with its sacred fire, he prepared to climb the ladder that led outside. A sudden movement from the shadows startled him. "Da de hair!" The voice, deep and resonant, belonged to Wakome. The old medicine man emerged from a recessed alcove, his tall form illuminated by the flickering firelight. Something in his expression, a softening around the eyes perhaps, suggested an emotion Eastman had rarely observed in his stern mentor. Wakome took Eastman's hand and led him to the center of the chamber, where the sacred fire cast enough light to clearly reveal their faces. The medicine man studied Eastman silently, his weathered features betraying a hint of sadness that caught Eastman off guard. "So," Wakome finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically gentle, "my son is not content to remain in peace and safety with me here." It wasn't a question. Instead, he longs to go forth in search of adventure, to emulate the foolish young braves who imagine they are already great warriors. Eastman's throat tightened. He had rehearsed explanations, but faced with Wacome's quiet dignity, the prepared words felt hollow. I only wish to join one war party," he managed. "I will return safely. You will see." Wacome's fingers tightened slightly around Eastman's wrist. "You cannot be certain of that," he said, a note of melancholy in his voice. "None of us controls our fate." He released Eastman's hand and straightened his shoulders. "But as you wish to go, you shall have your wish. At Stone Hawan's request, I have given my consent. I will sacrifice to Kawetsula for your speedy and safe return." The medicine man turned away, his silhouette sharp against the firelight. "Now go and complete your preparations. You have little time remaining." Without another word, Wakome disappeared into the shadows of the temple, leaving Eastman standing alone beside the sacred fire. For a moment, despite his burning desire for freedom, Eastman felt a pang of remorse. This man had saved his life when others would have taken it. Through 7 years of captivity, Wakome had treated him with a rough fairness that, at times, resembled affection. But the pull of his former life, of freedom, was stronger. Eastman climbed the ladder and emerged into the late afternoon sunshine, his resolution renewed. On his way to Ho Ditcha's lodge, he encountered Stone Hawan. "You will ride with us at dawn," the chief confirmed with a curt nod. "Be ready. We waste no time once the journey begins." "You are late," Ho Ditcha observed when Eastman finally reached his lodge, though the renegade's irritation faded when Eastman explained his encounter with Wakome. "The Old One sees more than he speaks of," Ho Ditcha remarked cryptically. "Now we must make you look the part." From several small skin pouches, Ho Ditcha extracted pigments of different colors, earth reds, charcoal blacks, ochre yellows, and white clays. He mixed them with animal fat to create vivid paints, working with the focused attention of an artist preparing his masterpiece. "Remove your shirt," he instructed Eastman. "A warrior does not hide his chest behind cloth." What followed was a transformation unlike anything Eastman had experienced in his years of captivity. Ho Ditcha stripped him to the waist, replacing his worn leggings with new ones and fitting him with fresh moccasins. Then, with surprising artistic skill, the renegade began applying paint to Eastman's exposed skin. His face, neck, and chest were colored blood red, while his arms received alternating bands of black and yellow. On his chest, Ho Ditcha painted the figure of a grizzly bear with remarkable detail, on his forehead a star. Across his face, narrow stripes of black that accentuated his cheekbones and jaw. Around his arms went circles of black and white at regular intervals. The paint felt cool and slightly greasy against Eastman's skin. Its scent, earthy and vaguely medicinal, filled his nostrils as Ho Ditcha worked in silence, occasionally stepping back to evaluate his progress before adding more details. When the painting was complete, Ho Ditcha treated Eastman's hair, which had grown past his shoulders during captivity, with a mixture of oil and black coloring that made it gleam in the fading light. A band of scarlet cloth bound around his head and 2 blue-dyed feathers completed the transformation. "Look," Ho Ditcha commanded, holding up a small metal mirror. The face that stared back at Eastman was almost unrecognizable, fierce, alien, belonging more to the Comanche world than to the white settlements he hoped to reach. The realization was both unsettling and useful. Disguised as a warrior, he might pass unnoticed when the time came to make his escape. "The paint will help protect you from the sun," Ho Ditcha explained, putting away his supplies, "and it will strike fear into our enemies." As finishing touches, the renegade placed a pair of bracelets made from roughly beaten gold on Eastman's wrists and hung a necklace of blue beads around his neck. Standing back, he nodded with satisfaction at the final effect. "No young brave in our party will present a finer appearance," he declared. "You are Da-de Hair no longer. You are a Comanche warrior." Ho Ditcha handed Eastman a sarap, a blanket that would serve as protection against the night air. "Get what sleep you can," he advised. "Tomorrow begins early, and the journey will test even the strongest among us." Eastman accepted the blanket with a nod of thanks. "I am ready," he said, the words carrying more meaning than Ho Ditcha could know. But as darkness fell over the village and the sounds of preparation for the war party echoed through the night, Eastman found sleep elusive. He lay awake on the buffalo robes in Ho Ditcha's lodge, his mind racing with plans and possibilities, with hopes and fears. Tomorrow he would ride with a Comanche war party dressed as one of them, moving ever closer to the freedom he had dreamed of for 7 long years. With each mile they traveled from the village, his chances of escape would grow, along with the dangers that awaited him on the vast prairie. From outside came the distant sounds of warriors singing their war songs around small fires, preparing themselves spiritually for the journey ahead. The melodies carried on the night air, alien yet familiar after so many years. Despite himself, Eastman felt the rhythm of the songs pulling at something within him, a recognition of beauty and meaning in this culture that had held him captive. He closed his eyes, willing sleep to come. Dawn would arrive all too soon, bringing with it the moment of truth, the beginning of his journey either to freedom or to death on the endless plains. The eastern sky had barely begun to lighten when Eastman opened his eyes. He had managed only a few hours of fitful sleep, his mind too occupied with plans and possibilities to find proper rest. Outside Ho Ditcha's lodge, the camp was already stirring. Muted voices, the soft creak of leather, the occasional snort of a horse. Eastman gathered his meager belongings and the horse equipment Ho Ditcha had provided. The paint on his skin had dried completely, creating a second skin that cracked slightly as he moved. He touched his face, feeling the unfamiliar texture of the designs Ho Ditcha had applied the previous evening. The cool morning air raised goosebumps on his exposed chest as he stepped outside. Other warriors moved through the dim light like shadows, their painted bodies creating strange silhouettes against the gray dawn. Eastman headed toward the area where the horses had been picketed, joining several warriors who were already leading their mounts to the nearby stream. The piebald Mustang Ho Ditcha had selected eyed Eastman warily, nostrils flaring at his scent. Eastman approached slowly, speaking in low tones, allowing the animal to grow accustomed to his presence. After a moment's hesitation, the horse permitted Eastman to lead him to water. "He will serve you well," a voice said behind him. Eastman turned to find Ho Ditcha, already mounted on a muscular black stallion. The renegade's face was transformed by elaborate war paint, black and yellow stripes radiating from his eyes, red handprints on his chest, white symbols Eastman didn't recognize adorning his arms. "The horse needs a name," Ho Ditcha continued. "A warrior's mount carries him between worlds. Its name must have power." Eastman considered this as he fitted the hair bridle over the piebald's head. The animal's coat reminded him of the mottled pattern of clouds across the moon on a windy night. "Wind Shadow," he said, the name coming to him suddenly. Ho Ditcha nodded approvingly. "A good name. Now mount up. The war party assembles." Eastman secured the buffalo robe pad on the horse's back and swung himself up. The mustang danced sideways momentarily, testing its rider, then settled. Eastman guided the animal back toward Ho Ditcha's lodge. "Eat," the renegade instructed, gesturing toward a pot of cold corn mush. "A warrior needs strength." Eastman managed only a few mouthfuls, his stomach tight with anticipation. He could hear the growing sounds of the village awakening fully. Children calling, dogs barking, the steady drumbeat that signaled the war party's imminent departure. After his brief meal, Eastman followed Ho Ditcha to the gathering place where hundreds of warriors had already assembled. The war party was an impressive sight. Nearly 500 men mounted on their finest horses, weapons gleaming in the strengthening light, painted bodies creating a kaleidoscope of color and symbol. The entire village had turned out to witness the war party's departure. Women stood in clusters, some holding up children to see the spectacle, others performing last-minute adjustments to a husband's or son's equipment. Young boys watched with naked envy, dreaming of the day they would ride to war. Old men, veterans of countless battles, nodded approval at the impressive force. Eastman followed Ho Ditcha through the crowd, acutely aware of the stares his presence attracted. Though his Comanche disguise was convincing, many villagers recognized him as Wakome's white captive. He heard whispers, caught glances of surprise and curiosity. "They admire you," Ho Ditcha said, noticing Eastman's discomfort. "Few white captives earn the right to join a war party." They reached a position near the center of the assembled warriors. Ho Ditcha instructed Eastman to remain with his band, 15 seasoned fighters who greeted Eastman with unexpected warmth. "Your paint marks you as one of us," a young warrior named Sharp Knife explained, approving of Ho Ditcha's handiwork. "The bear gives you strength, the star guides your path." Another warrior leaned from his horse to inspect Eastman's weapons. "Good bow," he commented. "Keep your arrows dry. The Arapaho will not wait while you string a new one." These practical words of advice continued as they waited for the signal to depart. Eastman absorbed them silently, finding unexpected camaraderie among men he had previously viewed only as captors and potential obstacles to his freedom. Near the front of the war party, Stone Howan sat astride a powerful bay stallion. The chief wore a full headdress of eagle feathers that cascaded down his back, and his chest bore intricate patterns that spoke of previous victories. At his side rode his most trusted lieutenants, their bearing evidence of their elevated status. Some distance away stood Toner Yo, a rival war chief who had not been selected to lead this expedition. His posture spoke of thinly veiled displeasure, though he maintained the dignified stoicism expected of a man of his rank. Stone Hewan approached him briefly, the two exchanging words too distant for Eastman to hear. When their conference ended, Stone Hewan raised his lance high overhead. The signal silenced the crowd instantly. Without further ceremony, the chief wheeled his horse and pointed toward the valley's mouth. The warriors formed into a single file with practiced efficiency, and the war party began its departure. The column of mounted men stretched for nearly half a mile, winding like a great painted serpent through the village and into the valley beyond. The villagers erupted in shouts and ululations, not words of farewell, but cries intended to inflame the warriors' courage and strike fear into distant enemies. As they rode past the temple complex perched on the valley's rim, Eastman glanced up. Standing atop the highest point, silhouetted against the morning sky, stood a group of priests and their assistants. Among them, unmistakable in his height and bearing, was Wakome. Eastman thought he saw the medicine man raise his hand in farewell, though at such a distance he couldn't be certain. Something tightened in his chest, not quite regret, but a complicated acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them over 7 years. Whatever Wakome had been to him, captor, protector, reluctant mentor, their paths were now diverging. As the war party rode rapidly along the floor of the valley, Eastman committed each landmark to memory. The twisted pine that marked the halfway point, the 3 large boulders where the stream narrowed, the cliff face with its distinctive red streak. Places he had seen countless times during his captivity now took on new significance as he surveyed them for what he hoped would be the last time. The morning was glorious. Eastman felt a surge of exhilaration as wind shadow carried him forward, the horse's powerful muscles moving smoothly beneath him. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats, the creak of leather, the occasional call from one warrior to another created a symphony of movement that Eastman found unexpectedly stirring. His body ached slightly from unaccustomed riding, but the discomfort only heightened his awareness. Each mile that passed between him and the Comanche village was a mile closer to freedom. The thought filled him with a vigor he hadn't experienced in years. By midday, they reached the valley's lower extremity. Here the path narrowed dramatically, following a precarious ledge that wound around the face of a sheer cliff. Warriors dismounted to lead their horses single file along this treacherous section. One misstep would mean a fatal plunge to the rocks hundreds of feet below. Wind shadow picked his way carefully along the narrow trail, hooves occasionally dislodging small stones that clattered into the void. Eastman kept his eyes fixed on the path, controlling his breathing to steady his nerves. This was the most vulnerable point of their journey. If his escape were discovered here, there would be no way forward or back. Once past this bottleneck, the party ascended a zigzag trail to the mountain range's crest, then began their descent to the plains below. From this vantage point, Eastman could see for miles in every direction. The valley behind them, now remote and toy-like. Ahead, the vast desert they would have to cross before reaching the grassy prairie beyond. Their route led directly east across the desert, the sun burning overhead, heat rising in visible waves from the sandy ground. Stone Howan set a punishing pace, allowing only brief stops to rest the horses. Water was rationed carefully, each warrior carrying oiled skin bags that prevented precious moisture from evaporating in the dry air. Eastman used these pauses to study the surrounding landscape and mark his position relative to distant landmarks. If he managed to slip away from the war party, he would need to navigate this unforgiving terrain alone. By late afternoon, they had crossed the worst of the desert and reached the beginning of the great grass prairie that stretched to the horizon. Here, Stone Howan altered their course, turning northward. The change in direction matched what Eastman had overheard about the location of the Arapaho camp, several days' ride to the northeast. As sunset approached, the chief led them to a spring known as Iho Caliente. With a gesture, he signaled the order to make camp for the night. The transformation from traveling column to organized encampment happened with remarkable speed and without spoken commands. The horses were picketed in a wide circle on the prairie where the grass grew tallest and most abundant. Warriors removed their equipment, carrying it to a position approximately 100 yards from the spring. Each man thrust his spear into the ground, then leaned his shield, bow, and quiver against it. Beside this makeshift weapons rack, he spread his buffalo robe or blanket, a simple but effective arrangement that defined each warrior's personal space while creating a defensive perimeter. Eastman followed the example of those around him, driving his lance into the earth and arranging his equipment as they did. Within minutes, the entire war party, 500 strong, had aligned their sleeping places in a formation that stretched several hundred yards across the prairie. Fires were quickly kindled, and warriors produced strips of dried buffalo meat from their provisions. The tough jerky was held briefly over flames to soften it before eating. Men gathered in small groups around the fires, smoking pipes, sharing stories, laughing at jokes Eastman could only partially understand. Their painted bodies caught the firelight, creating a spectacle both beautiful and unsettling. For 2 hours, the camp hummed with activity. Some warriors refreshed their war paint, carefully reapplying patterns that had faded during the day's journey. Others engaged in games of chance, wagering small trinkets on the outcome. Still others sang songs of past victories or recounted tales of famous battles. Eventually, Stone Hawan detailed warriors to guard the horses for the first watch of the night. The remainder of the party gradually settled down, rolling themselves in blankets or buffalo robes. Conversation dwindled to occasional murmurs, then silence broken only by the snap of dying fires. Eastman found himself unexpectedly alert despite the day's exertions. He reclined on his robe, leaning back against his saddle pad, observing the scene around him by moonlight. The fires had burned low, casting just enough light to reveal the recumbent forms of sleeping warriors. Dogs that had followed the war party prowled between the sleeping areas, scavenging for scraps of food and occasionally growling at each other. From beyond the camp came the distant howling of coyotes and the softer sounds of horses still awake and grazing. At intervals along the perimeter, Eastman could make out the silhouettes of the horse guards standing motionless, sentinels against potential threats. The vast prairie stretched around them, silvered by moonlight, seemingly empty yet alive with unseen creatures. Stars crowded the sky in numbers Eastman had forgotten existed, their brilliance undiminished by competing light. The Milky Way formed a luminous road across the heavens, a path as clear as the one Eastman hoped to follow to freedom. As weariness finally overcame his racing thoughts, Eastman lay down fully, pulling his sarap around his shoulders. The ground was hard beneath his buffalo robe, but after years of sleeping on earthen floors, this discomfort was familiar. His eyelids grew heavy as he stared up at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow would bring another day of riding, another step in his journey. He had survived the first day. He had successfully joined the war party and left the Comanche village behind. The hardest part, slipping away unnoticed, still lay ahead, but for this moment he allowed himself to feel a cautious hope. Sleep claimed him as he mentally traced possible escape routes across the starlit prairie. His dreams were a jumble of images: Wakome's knowing eyes, Ho Ditcha's cryptic smile, wind shadow running free across endless grasslands, and somewhere beyond reach the faint outline of a white settlement where his old life waited. This was only the beginning of Eastman's journey, a journey that would test not only his courage and resourcefulness, but also his understanding of the complex world between two cultures where he had existed for 7 long years. The war path had led him away from captivity, but whether it would ultimately lead to freedom remained to be seen. The camp fell silent. Eastman's breathing deepened as sleep finally overtook him, but this marked only the beginning of his journey toward freedom. The road ahead would unfold through perilous terrain, each step bringing new dangers and discoveries. In the wilderness that stretched before him, mercy existed in quantities as scarce as water in the desert he had crossed. His first day on the warpath had ended. The true test of survival was yet to come.